we go.
Okay, so Lars, you have already been seeing the slides and leaving comments, so I would like to go on unorthodox way and not just present the slides, but dive into the conversation and use the slides as a support for our conversation. So I think that the best place to start will be to review what pieces, what parts we have in play, but in a more mechanical sense, because I'm starting to see that the proposal you're making about how should we solve this involves many of the pieces that we already have. So I would like to start with some sort of inventory, perhaps, of what we have and what kind of operations we do. So we can see the touching point between what you propose and what we have now, and then start the discussion. Okay. So first, there is a small recap on the bidding formula. I think this pacing optimizer, I don't want to get into details right now on that, but mostly on the formula, I think we all know it by heart at this point, but just a quick recap of that formula, and then jump straight into the inventory. So in this formula, do you have any comments, Lars? Besides, I know it's multiplicative, you are proposing additive model, but.
Well, I think of the max bid formula, I mean, that I think the two comments there is like one, and I don't know we talked about this before, but one is like you need some sort of factor to control for basically like hitting the target. Like if you use this one directly, you're always going to undershoot, right? You're always going to provide a lower A cost on the target. And the second one is that I think it's a very interesting discussion you had around including or not including indirect sales, which is, I think, just a product question, like what would advertisers expect?
Okay, yeah. I'm taking note on that one, so we can discuss it at length in the next hours.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll jump straight into the inventory. So where am I here? So this is the mechanisms we have and the operation knobs we usually use in this sector. So I'm skipping everything, assuming that you read everything, because I know you did, because you left comments. So I'm skipping everything. The components we have, it's for the action, we have CTR and CVR models, and we have many of them for different places and different purposes. I don't remember if we have 3 CTR models. Eve, do you recall if we have a CTR model for reserve price as well?
No.
No, it's only, okay.
It's for placement, for dynamic placement and for score.
Okay, so in the auction part, we have these 5 models, those 5 models, CTR and CVR. And in the bidding zone, we have a CVR model, a pacing model, an optimizer. That was the first slide. And we have some sort of PID-like ACOS correction going on. So but that's kind of recent. So it's you're going to find formulas where it's not updated. So regarding that last point, recently we found out there is a lot of money to be made in that area, but recently, shame on us. So we at the moment have like 4 initiatives going on there because there's too much to be had, and so we must not fail there. So we have like 4 different projects going on how do we adjust max bid to get the most amount of value there. And then we have 2 operation knobs that I don't know if we have been explicit enough about, and that's we usually increase or decrease the average cost per click in some contexts, and we usually do that like every month. Or or more. So, and we do that by changing the conversion rate, the CVR, directly.
So how do you change the conversion rate? You mean you just kind of like change the PCVR or in the formula? Or
For instance, we usually do that by something called contextualization, we call it. So when we have a new placement, say a new recommendations carousel, for which we don't have previous context on how much is the conversion for that carousel, we kind of ballpark it and then correct it. And sometimes we, I believe, please business team and IT team correct me, I believe we also ballpark it if we are earning enough.
So what do you mean by that?
Can I help you?
We use it as a lever to monetize. So if we want to, yes, to monetize. So if you want to manage or try to do some adjustment quickly, very quickly, we can do this. That's why the knob, so we can move a little bit the CVR and try to impact the monetization. This is what we do, basically. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, yeah, that's what we do. I gave the recommendation example where we ballpark it and then we use the reality to try to adjust it. And then there are some moments where, for instance.
But so when we talk about CVR now, we're not talking about the output metric. This is sort of like because CVR is not a variable that you can change, right? I mean, not directly, but I think maybe we mean different things when we talk about CVR, or
no, we mean CVR. Thing is, let me give you a clearer example of that. Hot sales, thank you. That one, that's clearer. So we have a few moments in the year where the CVR spikes at a speed in which we cannot predict easily. So we make corrections for those dates, and those corrections are corrections in a way, and perhaps I know how much we do this. I believe not much, but perhaps they also are monetization expectations. So we should be earning that much in this context. What I'm trying to make here in this inventory, let's say auction mechanism, bidding mechanism, and operation knobs, is to just identify them. And in the case of bidding mechanisms or auction mechanism, my purpose in identifying them is reuse. And in the case of the operation knobs, is something that we must supplement or switch by something else somehow if we change mechanisms. So we are used to operate the business using those knobs. We need something else if we don't have them to fulfill the same purpose. Okay, so changing CVR is one of them. And then the other one where we are used to move is trade revenues for conversion, be it organic or inorganic, or the other way around. And that's the change in the alpha. So that is part of the day-to-day operation of the auction system, bidding auction system. So we do this often, and if we change something, we need to find some way to replace these knobs. Perhaps not to do literally what these knobs do, but to fulfill the same purpose. Okay. So where would you like to go from this point onwards?
Well, I added a proposal. Let me share it here to one of the docs that I shared earlier as well, here in the bottom. But I still don't quite understand. Hang on, let me just share with everyone. And maybe I can present this as well. Let's see. Hang on. I need to change some settings on my computer, it looks like, because we're recording. Let's see. Come on. Do you all see this? Or? I still don't 100% understand the CVR lever that we were talking about, but the other one is pretty clear. And I think if you have something like this, you will have the levers to trade revenues for CVR in a way. But I'm not sure if you have a lever to directly trade, what was it, conversions for, no, basic change pricing, I think, was the first one, right?
Yeah. Conceptually, it would be like being more expensive or being cheaper as a strategic decision, not as a something of the automatic of operation.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, like if you think something like this would be feasible, because this is the way that I was thinking about this was like, what is an efficient mechanism when you, instead of having like this like long-term direct contribution optimization, as we talked about and as I described above here, instead of that, you have conversions and GME constraints, right? So the way to incorporate that efficiently in ranking would be to basically set the cost for lost conversions, and there's a cost for lost GME, and that cost is C1 and C2 in this formula. Now, if we don't know what the conversions and GME impacts are, we don't have good prediction models. I mean, we talked about before some approaches to estimating that, but we can also think about CTR and CVR as proxies for conversion and GME, I think, to some extent at least. And I think you could use these levers, C1, C2, C3 here, which is similar to what you're doing now. This is just an additive formula rather than a multiplicative formula, right?
Yeah, it absolutely uses the pieces we have in place. So it becomes a closer stepping stone to getting to some North Star.
Yeah.
So Lars, I believe yes. I believe this can trade off revenues for quality, because if you increase C1 and C2, you dwarf the impact of bid.
Yeah.
So that one, yeah, I'm sure it works. I believe the other one, being globally cheaper or globally more expensive, we can address it later. I think this one is all right on that front. But do you believe that the goal of maximizing revenue with constraints on GMV and conversion it's a good goal?
No.
Oh, great. Let's talk about that.
Yep. I mean, I think we talked about this last time too. I think it's good to have some guardrails around GMV and conversions. I think if you see massive drops, that's not good, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think it should be the optimization goal. It shouldn't be like, let's maximize revenue with the constraint of having zero impact on conversions and GMV. I don't think that's the optimization goal. I think the good optimization goal is let's maximize long-term DC, right?
Okay. And what about let's say a closer in time with goal? So yeah, would it be in, no, it wouldn't be immediate DC. It would be the same to say revenues, right?
I'll say that again, Rafa.
So long-term DC, it sounds like a great goal, but it's far away from what we have now, or at least hard for me to see how do we connect the dots. What are the stepping stones that get us there? So what would you suggest as or let's talk about that. I mean, what do you think it would be a good goal closer to what we have now? So long-term DC is going to be super hard for us to just jump there.
So do you think something like this one, is something that's more of a stepping stone, and then we can talk about long-term impact in this doc? Do we have like a delta? I think there's a delta GMV kind of approximation now, right? Based on displacement of organic results. Is that right?
Yeah, and yes, we can somehow calculate that using the models that we have in place, like CTR, CVR, and displacement. Yeah, we can. And so, if I'm following you right, you say I will not sacrifice the goal. The goal is long-term direct contribution, but we could start with a long-term LTI component that is 0 at the beginning, and incrementally better like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, and another way to think about this, and let's just put it below here. So I think I talked about this in the other doc too, but let me just copy it here. But if you look at the long-term contribution doc, can you see it? Oh, you can't see it. It doesn't inspiration. But the long-term contribution doc has I actually changed it a little bit since last time, but I'll walk it up. It basically has like LTI, or we call it maybe a head quality, approximated. Really like to think about it. Think about long-term impact approximated by head quality, as defined by some combination of the quality estimate that we get from human labeling, if and when that's available, and then CTR, CVR, CTR times PCVR, which is similar to this thing here, right? It's very similar to this. Does that make sense? I mean, here I wrote it as like an offset around an average, which I think makes sense. But it's very similar to what we have right here.
Yeah, the CVR and CTR parts are I don't quite see it yet, because this LTI, long-term impact, the CTR and CVR parts are the short-term component of that formula, or is this supposed to be exclusively long-term and not short-term?
Well, the thinking here is we are going to think of CTR and CVR as proxy metrics for the long-term impact. So it's all looking at this like immediate CTR and CVR predictions, with the intuition that those are strongly correlated with the long-term impact. Now, I think it makes sense at some point to validate that that is true, but I think it's also something that's a decent starting point. It's better than not having any type of estimates for these things.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, looks good.
And I think, I mean, until we have the quality, the quality prediction on the human labels and all that stuff, I think we can just drop those things with the intent of adding it later, like this part, right? So, I mean, if we do that, we'll just fill in, instead of LTI, we'll fill in this whole part. Is that feasible, you think, as a starting point?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, all the pieces are in place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like it's no work at all. I mean, it's going to take time, but all the pieces are in place. I mean, it's still a function on CTR and CVR, which was what we were previously ready to deal with.
Yeah.
So yeah, looks good. Yeah, I think we could do this. Now, Lars, so we have some levers to solve some operating. Yeah, Caro.
Can I ask a question before, just regarding the quality piece? That definitely this is something we don't have now, but we are working on it. Regarding this specific part, besides the human labeling and all this core that we already spoke, do you see any other proxy or any other, I don't know, in the short term, something we could be using to calculate this quality or to estimate this quality? Or, yep.
Yeah, that's how I think about CTR and CVR.
Yeah.
As for quality. That, I mean, I think we have to see how much more value we get from quality. If we start with using pCTR and pCVR as proxy metrics for the long-term impact, once we have quality, we'll see if it adds additional value, right? We can start trying some values for the constant P here and see, does it lead to better overall results? And it's useful to run an experiment for maybe like 8 to 10 weeks when looking at that, because you do want to see this kind of longer term behavioral impact.
To validate if what we are estimating is happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Validate that you get better results in, you know, not just immediately, but in the longer run.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Does it make sense, Rafa? Because I'm thinking about it's gonna take us more time to get the quality metric, as Lars is putting here, coming from all the process, all the human labeling and all the stuff. And then we should be, I think we could be testing this, not just waiting for the outcome from app and I don't know. I'm just trying to think about something we could be working in midterm, let's say.
It's totally doable. As we said earlier, the LTI can be 0 at the beginning, and so and with little cost, not 0, because we can use CTR and CVR, which we already have in place. So this looks doable.
Okay.
I'm not saying easy, but doable. The thing is, going into the pragmatics part of all of this is that, so there are more or less the same pieces, and we're switching additive for multiplicative, and more or less the same pieces. So perhaps the challenge is moved. It's not really if it is multiplicative or additive. It's the quality of the CVR and CTR we can produce, and the bidding procedure, in which Lars proposes stronger things. So because if in the pragmatics of this, if we try and put this into production, it has to go through the same tests that it has to overcome the same difficulties that we already tried the last year and a half. So it has to work better than the score of Bisector. It has to work, provide at least same revenues, same GMV, and same conversions. And Bisector is a strong contender on that front. So we can try it. We can also be careful on what we learned in the past about that challenge, because the pieces are the same. We're still talking about CTR, CVR, and bid, and so we're changing one model for the other, but it's additive and multiplicative. So it can be different. It might be. It could be that it's not that radically different in this part. Maybe somewhere else. Maybe in the bidding. It's a risk, let's say. What do you think, Lars, about what I just said?
Well,
your experience.
I think the challenge is that if we're trying to do two things at the same time, it might be difficult, right? If we're saying, in a sense, we're both trying to optimize for DC as well as while maintaining those the GMV and conversion constraints, which I think just makes it more challenging for ads. Because you almost have like two different optimization goals at the same time. So it might be better to think about these as like two different ranking models, which can use a lot of the same components. But we have two models. One is the model that will optimize for long-term direct contribution, and another model that will optimize for maximizing near-term ads revenue with GMV and conversion constraints. If you put them together, they're not going to work as well to achieve any of the individual single goals as if you have separate models that's just optimizing for the single goals.
Yeah, looks amazing. That will work with the culture of our company. I say if we start with near-time revenues and then we trade off a little by little for long-term impact, that will work, because it's super hard to sell an A/B testing that goes negative on GMV or revenues, even though we know that maybe a month from now that revenue is going to come back. It's super hard to sell it. So
yeah, I don't know how we should think about that. So I think this would be the right way to write the ranking function if the constraints are on conversions and GMV, right? You just price it in, like you have a C1, C2, and to the extent that you can estimate the conversion impact and GMV impact of showing an ad, you can just put that in. And if not, you can use some proxy formula. So maybe it's this or something similar.
Yeah.
But if you really want, but this is sort of like optimization for long-term direct contribution, right? So this is slightly different. It's using a lot of the same components, but it's not exactly the same.
Okay, so I think so. The suggestion will be like using the formula above first, and then adding the second formula, or mixing the two formulas, a weighted sum of both in time as we develop better and better long-term scores, right?
Yeah, that could be a good idea actually. Yeah. So you, I guess you would have something like.
Because they're in the same units, right?
Yeah, it's the same unit, exactly. So you will have something like this. I think this is what you're saying, right? So you have this times A plus this times B, right? Where A plus B is 1, maybe. Sorry, just this part.
Yeah. So we don't count the bit twice or something.
Let's see. No, X1 plus B equals 1. Oh, that doesn't work.
Yeah, that totally looks like a plan we can execute. I mean, we will need good CTR and good CVRs, but
yeah,
we can execute this plan. I mean, it looks great. Lars, I don't know what you think, but I think it will be a good idea to, at some point in the conversation, it could be now or later, jump to the bidding part, because I think in your proposal is quite key.
Yeah, whenever you want.
Okay. Let's see. I think we have one more topic on this. It will be direct or indirect CVRs, and then we jump to the bidding. What do you say? Okay.
Sure.
So what's your point of view on direct contributions, indirect contributions, 24 hours or 30 days?
I mean, there's two ways to think about it. One is we have to choose something that most advertisers would be happy with, and the other way to think about it is you could give advertisers the control. But yeah, I mean, it's purely a product question, I think. What is advertisers' expectation? What would deliver most value to advertisers? I don't think there's like a perfect answer to that.
Okay,
and there's also like some. It doesn't have to be 24 hours or 7 days. It could or 30 days. It could be 7 days or anything in between, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But let's. So one CVR goes in the construction of the bid, but we are depending on CVR and CTR here in these formulas, and they're really not the same.
Yeah.
So what do you think in the context of the score? about this distinction between direct and indirect short-term and long-term attribution?
I think short-term, I think maybe for quality, short-term is better because there is less noise. You know, to the extent that the short-term value is lower, you also have the free variables that you can adjust in order to scale it up. But I mean, it's not like a very super strong, I don't have like a super strong opinion, but I guess that's, if I have to answer, that would be my answer. Use the shorter term rather than longer term.
Okay, okay. I thought
But Rafa, I think you made a point earlier somewhere that we don't have to use the same attribution window for different use cases, right? Like bidding is one use case and quality is a different use case. Maybe for bidding, it makes sense to have a longer window because, you know, revenues, you know, you can
value prop.
Bigger number. But again, like if advertisers don't believe in the number, it's not good. If we don't believe it's causal or incremental, it's not good. So it's also like what do we believe is a better representation of the true value that the platform delivers to advertisers? I think that's the real question.
Okay, yeah, but before, I think you said that there was a point regarding direct and indirect attribution or CAVR that we should consider or discuss. This was it or something else?
I think that's
this is it. Okay, so we can double click on this when we go to specific cases then.
Yeah.
So Lars, regarding the bidding model, well, I think we reviewed the formula used to I'm going to present now. We reviewed the formula we use to build a bid. We are recently incorporating something like you proposed in the construction of the max bid, something in the lines of a PID controller, not quite that, but in the lines of that. And and the pieces we have to build this max bid are this kind of PID controller and the CVR. And what do you, can we review your proposal, or what do you think about what we have and how it should work better with your proposed ad score?
Yes, I think if you have the PID control, I think that's the most important part in order to solve some of the problems that at least Karo and I discussed early on around hitting advertisers' ACoS and not severely underpricing.
Okay.
I mean, I can share what I put together too, if that's useful. But I think it's very similar to how you think about it, right? So you have the target, ACoS target. I think the one thing that I would add is to think about bidding and budgeting as a single mechanism.
Okay. So it will be it will be like a more complex piece, right?
Yeah, let me, is it okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay, hang on. Yes, it's very similar, right? But I think, so you have the target ACoS, which you have, I think this is the difference, the budget throttle. eCVR, you have P item sold, item price, I think you have. Target multiplier, this is the PID controller. This is something that I also seen has been very effective to have a separate prediction for auction discount. But I think that's kind of like a follow-up once you have the other pieces figured out. I think the other ones are probably more important. So I think this is the piece that's different. So adding a budget throttle directly in the bid formula, where if the campaign is not budget constrained, it would always be 1.0. If it is budget constrained, you wanna find a value here that's as constant as possible through the, like, ideally like the lifetime of the campaign or whatever, or at least for the period that the budget is set at. So say I'm 50% budget constrained, this should be set to 0.5, right? If I could spend.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you see that some sort of portfolio optimization happens there? So this is per item or per campaign?
So that's a good question that we should probably, or maybe talk about in more detail. So did you say previously that that is a choice that we provide advertisers if they want to spend equally across items or no?
I think it could be a choice, but it is not. Maybe Caro or Nico, do you have opinions on this?
Yeah, so our campaign, this is a very good point. We were discussing this earlier today, and this is my main question today. Remember we spoke by email. So our ACoS target is on a campaign level. That's it. So we never ask the users, the sellers, how much they want they are willing to move this target by item. Something important to say, we have campaigns with 3 items, we have campaigns with 1,000 items. And of course, this is an average, or this is a target across campaign, and it's generic. So this is not it's not personalized, or it doesn't take into account the item potential to move the ACoS. So this is one of the things that I know you probably were saying too. Don't use only the target ACoS on a level campaign to limit the max bid or how much we are bidding, because it's just a number that, yes, overall, we want to meet combined, all the items combined, 1,000 or 3 items. They should deliver on a campaign level the real ACoS, similar to the target ACoS. But it can fluctuate. So we don't have a commitment on an item level. One item can be higher, the other one can be super lower, and then we have the total. So this is exactly, so today we don't have this on a item level. We don't take this into account, or we don't calculate. And this was actually my main question to you, how could we move from this campaign level towards a item level? How would be the benefits of it? And I know you already sent us some ideas about how to do this.
Yeah, so I think my expectation from advertisers.
Just to answer, regarding the users, I think there is an expectation to see or to manage on a granular way, talking about the top sellers, of course, because they see the result. They see the result on an item level. They see the performance of the item. And it could be interesting to kind of be accurate to that, but they don't have any levers to move on an item level.
So do you think, as an advertiser, my expectations based on how this works elsewhere in the industry would be, one, that the target ACoS would be something that I would expect to be met within some fluctuation at an item level, right? So I would say like the target ACoS that I have in my campaign is what I expect for every item. Of course, there's going to be some fluctuation just based on, randomness and our ability to.
I think depends, but overall, I think if we respect the campaign level, we are meeting the requirements, and then they can move, and this is what they do. They move the items across different campaigns. If the item is not, it's like a practice to optimize the campaign, and they should or could define the mix of items per campaign based on the performance. So one item that has a totally different ACoS result, it shouldn't be in the same campaign. So actually, this is an input to say, hey, this item should be moved to the campaign B, not to the campaign C, because the ACoS is totally different, you know?
Well, I think as an advertiser, it's like, and there's probably a little bit difference from advertiser to advertiser how they think about this. But I think it's very common to think about like, what is my gross margin on the item sold, right? So if I have a 50% gross margin, maybe I'm okay with a 30 to 40% ACoS. If my gross margin is 10%, I'm not okay with a 30 to 40% ACoS, right? As an advertiser.
Yep.
So I would expect not too much fluctuation. I agree with you, though, Taro, that like, oh, if we meet this at the campaign level, we kind of fulfill our promise to the advertiser. I agree with you, but I do think there's some expectation that it shouldn't diverge too much on an item by item level.
Yeah, I agree. But what I'm saying, I totally agree. Sorry, I interrupt you, but depends on the case, because I see a lot of top sellers, they have thousands and thousands of items, and they don't go through item per item to check it and to see this difference by item. So I agree with you, but in the practice, it's not exactly like this. Depends. If I go to a seller that has 3, 4, 5 items in a campaign, they will be, of course, trying to match the ACoS target per item, because this is feasible, doable. But in the other case with top sellers, it's totally different. Depends case by case, but I think we should be closer to the real, on an item level, to the campaign target. And it could be a trigger to move the item from campaigns, or something we could do or recommend in order to, if we go too far from the target, I'm saying. So I'm not too concerned about fluctuating or having this difference between items if I respect the campaign item, and we can move the items according to the performance as it goes, you know.
I mean, so on the one hand, I agree with you that I think it makes sense to recommend, like, for example, a higher ACoS target if we don't see any performance at a lower ACoS target. On the other hand, it seems also a little backwards to say, well, we have to move items based on the performance into the right campaign with the right ACoS target, right? Because I think the point with having an ACoS target is advertisers, you know, want to achieve a certain level of performance for that item. But yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to provide recommendations if things aren't performing, if items aren't performing at a specific ACoS target, and say we need a higher ACoS target in order to see more sales. I think that makes a lot of sense. I do feel maybe we're conflating, or maybe it's not really conflating, but we're talking about two different things, I think. Or maybe I misunderstood, but I thought we started talking about budget utilization by item, but there's also the ACoS performance by item within a campaign.
Exactly. Right? One thing and the other. I mean, how do we manage this, or where's the opportunity in the case, how we are doing versus what we should be doing, and we can move from that.
Yeah, because I think with regards to ACoS, I do think there's some expectation that we're going to be reasonably close on an item by item level, like not like crazy off, right? I do think some fluctuation is okay. On a budget utilization, I don't think there's an expectation that we would use budgets equally, unless that's explicitly mentioned somewhere. I do think like if some items perform a lot better than other items, it's okay to spend the majority of budgets on those items. But I don't know if you disagree and if you heard other things from advertisers or there's other expectations.
To be honest, I think I agree with you in regarding the price. They should be according to the item, and we never ever promise, or we don't have the CPC. We don't have this this promise. I think in this case, it's I totally agree on that. Yeah, I think, I don't know, I'm giving my personal opinion on that. I know we have a lot of experts here on the table, so this is basically my thoughts on this. But guys, please feel free to add your comments as well.
I mean, it's definitely a good question in the sense that I think it's possible you can drive more revenue, right? If you kind of manage item by item level ACoS target, if certain things sell more at the or you can get more, sell more ads at a lower price, and you can manage it that way. But I don't think that's really the advertisers' expectations, and I do think there's some relationship between ACoS target and the gross margin that the advertisers are making on the sales. So, all right, it sounds like there's agreement, at least among people who contribute to the chat.
So picking up there, back to the formula, somewhere in this formula, I guess then there should be something about portfolio. So if you have an excess margin, if you can consume more from the campaign budget or not on this particular item, and perhaps something about and so, yeah, that one. And then the other one is something about exploration, perhaps. So what if this formula is not good enough yet, because we have too much uncertainty on the CVR. We haven't exposed this item too much. So what do you think on, and let's go by parts. How do you think we should handle portfolio here, Lars?
So I guess my question is, like, do we actually need to handle portfolio? So I mentioned two things. Like, one is let's try to hit the ACoS target on the item level, and let's not have any promises with regards to budget utilization on an item level. And I don't know, Rafa, if you agree with those two approaches, but if you do, then I don't think do we actually need any handle portfolio anyway explicitly? Maybe you can explain what you mean by portfolio. Like, what's the use case? What is it that we're trying to achieve?
I guess that I'm seeing it this way. I believe that we should be, by representing the advertiser, maximizing GMV of the advertising, constrained to not going above budget, and not doing it at an efficiency below ACoS. So max GMV could mean that the diminishing returns curve of some items is better than others. So you can drop more budget on them and get better average ACoS on.
Okay, so I think that's a little different than my kind of first statement, where you say, let's try to hit the ACoS target for each item. I think what you're saying is, let's not necessarily do that. Let's play with the ACoS target for each item in order to maximize GMV. And I'm not sure if that's the advertiser expectation.
Well, what if I'm just playing here, Lars? You are the absolute expert, so please.
There's a lot of expertise in the room, so please speak up.
This is what I'm thinking. What if I could use the whole budget at an ACoS lower than what you said, but I'm using the whole budget, so I'm getting more GMV out of it. So instead of, say, you get 100, you get 110 out of the same budget.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we value for the advertiser.
Yes, I think there's two. Let's think about it. So there's two cases. One is infinite budget. There's no budget constraint. It's easy, right? Or maybe that's not the right thing to say, but at least, like, it's a little less complex than if you have a constrained budget.
Yeah. I think the PID controller just solves that case. It's like, okay, everyone goes up in the diminishing returns curve up to the point on which they hit ACoS and stop.
And in the other case, if there is a constrained budget, then you have the budget throttle. Oh, sorry, I'm clicking the wrong place. Then you have the budget throttle here, right? So I do think that the way to maximize value to advertisers, like, assuming that we want to hit the target, like, a similar ACoS target. If you do want to have a similar ACoS target for each item, then having a constant budget throttle would maximize the value to advertisers. Is that right? I think that's true. But it's not necessarily true if we're okay having different ACoS targets or different ACoS, different ACoS for different items. Because then you could play with it, right? The budget throttle could be higher for some items and lower for other items.
And regarding exactly this point, let's say we do, and I don't think we should change the campaign level target, ACoS target, and you have the items. How could we personalize or calculate a different, which should be the variables in an item level? So let's say the campaign keeps the ACoS 10%. And then how can we take from the item, what should be looking into the item to evaluate and fluctuate this ACoS on an item level, on a bid level in this context, not just the total, it'll be opening the first one, target ACoS, and which other component or something else we should be calculating to take into account the item context.
You mean personalizing the bid for each user, or what do you mean?
Yeah, no, the bid is gonna happen on a considering the item on an item when I have an auction, correct? So we do have here the target ACoS defined by the advertiser on a campaign level, but we are talking. So we are bidding on an item. So this item is
Yeah, so I think target ACoS and maybe budget throttle would be on the campaign level. PCVR, key item sold, item price, they would be on the item level, right?
These components, you were saying the item context or the granular context of the item, it would be, yes, it would be calculated by this based on the target ACoS. And we shouldn't be changing this ACoS considering something else. We should take into consideration the CVR, the placement, of course, the item price. That is the component of the item. Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking about it because we have this discussion and we were exactly thinking about if we should or not change the bidder based on or change the ACoS, keep them on a campaign level or move into an item level somehow. Nico, this is what we were discussing earlier with Javi, and he was, so that's why I'm double checking to understand if we are moving. So yeah.
And Rafa, back to your question, thinking about it, I don't think you actually do need to think about portfolio beyond setting a constant budget throttle. If you have like